about arguably one of the most significant decisions we will all make this year. So let me encourage you to enjoy this evening. Should be informative, fun, and hopefully a little bit entertaining. Thank you.
I'm sure it will be.
A little bit entertaining. And before we get much further, I want to recognize the executive editor of the commercial. Next up, the city. Thank you all for being here. You can have a seat. The microphones, you can walk around, talk with them. Got water there and your notes, and so we're all set. Now, the rules of the debate, we've gone over them, but just so that everyone knows, they're as follows. Each candidate...
To the commercial bill, thanks not only for hosting tonight's debate, but for the splendid series you did some time ago, really spelling out to the history of the city's financial crisis and how we got there, and giving some suggestions as to how we might get out of that. I mention that because one of the most pressing issues is the financial status of our city, which raises the question is, when we're on a right trajectory, as we're beginning to turn things around, is this the time to change? You have a situation here in which you have someone who has served as county mayor, had a financial crisis there, turned it around. You don't hear the phrase pension crisis in county government, nor do you hear fiscal crisis there. We went into a situation that was pretty much the same as what we're in the city of Memphis now, but when we left there, we've turned it around, and if we stay on the right course, we'll do the same thing with our city of Memphis. Some see our city so much doom and gloom. I see just the opposite. Crime is down, unemployment is down, and employment is up. Number of city employees is down. Businesses are relocating here. Our population is beginning to grow. This is a time, a positive time in our great city. You have someone who has a record, not merely promises. I hope to continue serving you as your mayor for the next 4 years. Thank you for coming out and participating.
My name is Mike Williams, and I want to be your next mayor. Doom and gloom. What's the reality of Memphis right now? I keep hearing crime is down, but when I turn on the news, all I see is murders. I see children that are getting into all kinds of mischief. We do have less city employees, but that means core services are suffering. That means the citizens of the great city of Memphis are suffering. We don't have the obligation of the schools anymore. We should realize $57 million. We increased taxes from $309 to $340. That's an additional $31 million. We don't have inspection stations, but you still pay for it on your tags. That's $12 million. We closed down weights and measures. Now we don't even know if our gas has water in it. That was a service being provided to the citizens. Tonight we're going to talk about the reality. Crime is up, core services are suffering, and we got to deal with the real issues of the city of Memphis.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, your time. Next up, opening statements, 90 seconds to Councilman Mr. Harold Powell.
Thank you, Kyle. Good evening, and welcome to the great University of Memphis. My name is Harold Collins. I'm a native Memphian. I grew up in Westwood, attended the University of Memphis on a music scholarship, so when I saw the band go by, I wanted to jump in line. But the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Memphis is in a quagmire. We are fighting among ourselves, the employees against business, business against the citizens. There is no direction, no fulfillment of obligations. Promises are made and not kept. People are voting to cut pensions and benefits. That's why we do have a decline in our employees. 400 less police officers in 2 years. 150 less firefighters in 2 years. So that's absolutely right. But here's the bigger picture. We can do better. We can have engineering, technology, administration, and finance jobs in Memphis. We can do better. We can recruit those companies just like we recruited those companies and gave them pilots that came and took our treasure and didn't give us anything back. We can do better. We can do better by our children by providing them with the necessary goods and services, community centers and libraries that this council did 2 years ago. We can do better. We can do better. We don't have to be resided as a low-wage, uneducated community. We can do better.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. That's your time. And the last opening statement, 90 seconds, to Mr. Jim Strickland.
Thank you so much to the Commercial Appeal, the University of Memphis, and for you folks for coming out tonight. There are many good things going on in Memphis, but our city is not growing. We're not growing in jobs. 140 net new jobs in the last 6 years, an average of 23 per year. We're not growing in population. Why are we not growing? Because city government is not providing for safe neighborhoods and clean streets. When I'm mayor, I'm going to do 3 things to turn that around. Number 1, drastically reduce crime. Number 2, clean up the blight and the litter and do the basics of government like paving streets. And number 3, measure results on our service to you and hold people accountable. And if we can do that, if city government can do its job, this city will soar. And we need to do it not only for the collective group of us. We need to keep the individuals in mind. Like Mr. Edinburgh in Fraser, who asked me months ago, please enforce the curfew law, because me and my neighbors do not feel safe walking around our neighborhood. And Ms. Llewellyn in Mitchell Heights, who needs city government help to clean up her neighborhood. And the young mother who approached me several months ago and said her young daughter wants to sleep in the bathtub because she's afraid of stray bullets. We can change Memphis for the better, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. So now it's time to go to our 4 topic areas. I'll ask you to hold the applause until the end of the debate now as we try to get into some of these topics. Mr. Williams, the question is this. It's on crime and public safety. And we can stand here all night and debate whether crime is up or crime is down, depending on the stats, and I suspect we might. What matters, though, is where we go from here, where we go from January 1st next year when one of you gentlemen is sworn into office or takes the oath of office again. So what are your specific plans to reduce crime in Memphis? That's the question. Mr. Williams, you have 90 seconds.
Well, first of all, that's why I mentioned the numbers of the millions that we should be realizing right now. One of the first things I would do is have a forensic audit. I think we need to know exactly how physically sound the city is, because we hear so many different varying numbers when you go to city council. I will still say crime is up. What I would initially do is restore the benefits of city employees.
Yes, thank you.
Because in order to draw qualified individuals to this city, we have to offer packages that are commensurate with other cities. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and they say, well, you know, in the private sector. Public employees are not private sector. In the private sector, they get Social Security, and they get the opportunity to participate in a 401k, or they may even get the profit share. We got to ensure that the citizens of the city of Memphis are getting the best qualified. That's why we haven't had the problems we've had in a lot of other cities. But guess what? We're losing them. So we have to restore the benefits. We have to make sure that the wages are comparable to other cities our size. And remember, Mike Williams didn't say it, but the FBI said we live in the 3rd most violent city in the nation.
That's right.
We have to take care of the citizens of this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. The same question, what are your specific plans to reduce crime in Memphis, goes to Mr. Collins. 90 seconds.
Number 1, we increase our deployment of police officers up to the Operation Safe Community level that we, the members of the board of directors, did several years ago to 2,400. Number 2, we aggressively prosecute those individuals who continue to allow blight to choke our communities. which breeds crime and gang activity. Number 3, we utilize our strategic resources in working with juvenile court to detain those violent individuals who commit crimes in our community. But what we do is we make a determination. They get a hearing before a magistrate and a judge, a prosecutor and a lawyer. And we make the determination if we can salvage them or we hold them accountable according to the law. And then finally, we engage with our school system. We come up and partner with Dr. Doris or Mr. Hobson, and we make sure that we can provide meaningful after-school programs for these young people so that we can partner and give them opportunities, summer jobs, training, etiquette training. We can do those kinds of things that help our young people understand that they have a value and a future in life. As your mayor, on January 1st, we will institute those kinds of policies in partnership with the Statewide County School System, working with our juvenile court system, instituting an aggressive policing rank to recruit those 2,400 officers back
Thank you,
to
Mr.
Memphis.
Collins. Your time's up. The next question, or the same question, is your specific plans to reduce crime in Memphis is to Mr. Strickland for 90 seconds.
Violent crime has increased the last 3 years by 9%. Over the last 6 years, it's increased by 6%. We all know violent crime's up. My specific remedies: I'm 100% committed to Blue Crush. We need more officers on the street and fewer responding to auto accidents and chasing dogs. We need to move the animal control officers under the police department so they can handle the animal issues. We need to enforce the curfew law. We've had a curfew law on the books for years and it's never enforced. We need to have zero tolerance for violent crime. And when I say that, I mean, right now, if a juvenile commits a violent act on another human being, they are not automatically taken down to juvenile court. That's not zero tolerance. That's the exact opposite. They need to be taken down to juvenile court. We need tougher laws to punish violent crime, including domestic violence. If you commit multiple domestic violence offenses, you need to be charged with a felony. We also need to do a better job of intervening in the lives of young people. As mayor, I would gather the business community, education community, and the nonprofit community, and figure out how do we intervene in the lives of these young people like the Boys and Girls Club does. They help middle school kids and high school kids with life skills and academics, and for 3 years in a row, 100% of their graduates have gone on to higher education or gotten a job. We can turn this thing around on crime. Other cities are doing it.
Mr. Strickland, thank you. And finally, Mr. Wharton, your specific plans to reduce crime in Memphis going forward.
Thank you. Of course, everybody starts with the proposition and the reality that we do need to restore our police department to its complement of around 2,500 officers. But even within that, let's get the body cameras in, which I've pioneered on that. They'll be out in the field. Officers will be emboldened. They won't have to worry about false charges being filed against them. We'll have GPS equipment on all of the cars, so we'll know precisely where they are, which will facilitate dispatching. And again, make sure that when we take officers through the academy, that they have the courses there that are truly needed in patrolling a very diverse community that we have. Put a particular emphasis on the Hispanic community, which is particularly vulnerable. Make sure that we have full courses on that and do more recruiting in that area to bring in more Hispanic members onto the police department. But we'll never be able to jail our way out of this. And everybody's talked about what they're going to do, but you're looking at someone who has actually done. Pick up the paper this morning, $150,000 for city year, in which we will have folks going, and it's not government money, by the way, going in, working with children who are having trouble in schools, and we're going to multiply that money. That 150 is just the beginning. Bringing in money with the gun down project that we did, the summer camps in which we've gotten private money for that. The best way to deal with this is on the front end. And it's not necessarily meaning locking all of them up in juvenile court. NPR just said the other day that that's the worst way. Thank you.
It's time for the follow-up questions, and what I'll do with these are I'll ask specific questions of the candidates. They'll get 60 seconds to respond, and touts the effects of programs like Gun Down, the 911 Block Squad. I'm sure you could reference some more. Yet, major violent crime statistically is actually up in recent years. We had 6 homicides since just Friday night, although to be fair, that number is trending lower than last year. So tell me this, in 60 seconds, how can you prove your plans and your programs are actually working?
The Crime Commission, since our report came out today, as a matter of fact, violent crime in the city of Memphis is down 4%. A lot of it depends on where you benchmark it. You benchmark from 2006, it's down even more. If it's year to year, it's down 4%. But that's not the big measure. The big measure, because we can split hairs on these numbers, is what kind of effective programs, and we know what does work. What does work is keeping children out, as opposed to what these gentlemen are saying, taking more of them in there. There's study after study after study. NPR just released it last week that the best way to increase crime is coming down with this, take every one of them into the court system. And all of these changes that they're going to make, the city of Memphis cannot make those changes. That was the Justice Department decree. Yes, you can transport a child to juvenile, but they go through that 19-point check and they might not keep them. But on the front end, we've been able to show that the best remedy is prevention.
Your time. Thank you. The question's for Mr. Williams, and this is a question from a reader. We solicited questions for the past few days on our website. We got a bunch of them, so I'll sprinkle a few of them in here and there. This is from Quincy and Frazier. The Memphis Police Association, an organization of which you are the president, once erected billboards in Memphis claiming that the city is not safe and therefore visitors should beware upon entering. How does such an act promote economic growth in our city? Does it hurt the city's image? And I'll add my own addendum to it. This wasn't Quincy's. Do you regret being part of that? 60 seconds.
No, I do not. At that current time, I was the president of the Memphis Police Association, and my job was to advocate for officers. They had 4.6 taken from them.
That's right.
Their insurance had been increased almost 42% in 4 years.
Retirees.
The insurance had went up. They had no other recourse. But I will tell you that after those billboards went up, I had businesses calling. And they said, Mr. Williams, what will it take to get those billboards down? And I said, get them to give us our 4.6 back.
That's right.
And they gave it back. And the billboards were down in less than a month. Sometimes drastic means you have to revert to drastic measures. Were we trying to hurt the city? No. But as the president of the police association, we stood firm for the officers in the city. And now I wish we had stood even firmer because we're losing qualified individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Your time is up.
That's right.
This is to Mr. Collins. Mr. Williams has said in the past that many officers have left the city as a result of the benefit cuts last year, essentially making the police department less equipped to attack crime in our city. Director Armstrong, I believe, said just this week that 5 or 6 officers per week are leaving the force. So I'll ask you this. How do you move forward and replenish the police force? 60 seconds.
Lost 5 on
Well, first of all, the council is moving toward a ordinance that will allow those officers who have applied for the drop program to stay on. That number will stay at 2092. What I've advocated for is to go a step further. We have 280 vacant police officer positions that are funded in this year's budget. Why not allow those officers that retired 6 months ago or a year ago come back to the force if they want to, as long as they can do the fitness and agility and the shooting. Because, number one, they're already under 65, so they're going to lose their health care, and that's why the administration tried to bring that back and amend the ordinance of the drop anyway. So it ought to be fair for those officers who came back. Number two, then we aggressively began to recruit new officers right here at the University of Memphis in the Department of Justice, headed up by Dr. K.B. Turner. I've spoken to them many a times.
Collins, your time's up.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Wharton on this, have the last few questions on this topic. Mr. Wharton, the Black Lives Matter movement has drawn the nation's conscience more than ever before on interactions between the police and African Americans. What steps will you take or are you taking as mayor to address that tension? 60 seconds.
First of all, I'll commit to keeping the calm, steady hand of Director Tony Armstrong. who has acquitted himself exemplary across the nation. He is a steady hand. He struck the right balance. And this is not the time to even contemplate changing, and I'll make that commitment right now. As I indicated to an earlier question, making certain that within the academy and within the assignments that our officers are properly sensitized to that. We will do studies to make sure that we don't see any patterns there in which there are there's racial discrimination in terms of who gets arrested or whatever. But it will be ingrained in the academy. It will be enforced from the top down, a proper sensitivity to cultural differences. That's what you have in a diverse community such as we have here. And the key thing is to make certain that the officers who, not intentionally.
Thank you. Your time's up. The last question on this topic, I'm going to ask Mr. Strickland to address that same question, if you will. You'd like me to repeat it? Sure. The Black Lives Matter movement has drawn the nation's conscience more than ever before on interactions between police and African Americans. So what steps could you take as mayor to address that tension in 60 seconds?
First of all, absolutely Black Lives Matter. And it's inexcusable and unacceptable for any police officer to treat another human being differently solely based on race. And we've, in Memphis, have had a fairly good history between the police department and the community. And I believe that you can have Blue Crush and community policing together. There's some myth out there that they're mutually exclusive. Community policing does work with interacting with the community. But let's go back to talk about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter when they're young and they don't have bad interactions with the police. We have to give these children hope, like the Boys and Girls Club. We have to revitalize our community centers. As a mayor, I will bring together private-public partnerships to put money into the community centers and give them programming and structure and help those young people develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland, and that is all for that.
Last year's vote was the hardest vote I've ever had to take in my life. But let's turn back the clock a little bit and see how we got in the position we were. In 2010, the current mayor refinanced our debt, borrowed more money, increased our interest rate, and increased our annual debt payment to the tune of $23 to $47 million per year for 8 or 9 years. $23 to $47 million per year for 8 or 9 years. Then the state passed a law to say that we needed to fully fund our pension. And we have a shrinking tax base. It really put the squeeze on our budget. When I'm mayor, I'm going to be more transparent with our budget. We're going to open it up for the employees, the media, the public, and really find out what we can afford and what we can't afford. But I want you to know that I will continue to be a good steward of taxpayers' dollars and don't unnecessarily raise the property tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Mr. Warden, 90 seconds, same question. Were the cuts the right thing to do? What else must we do to shore up the city's financial picture, or would you support rolling them back?
When you consider the alternatives of losing our pension plan, for which there is no substitute, they were the right thing to do. And folks up in here recently thought, oh, pensions will never go into bankruptcy. You ask Detroit, you ask Pritchard, Alabama, you ask Central Falls, Rhode Island. Yes, because there is a substitute for health care. There is no replacement for a pension plan. We're not covered by the Pension Guarantee Board. But there is a substitute for health care. Now, we're all entitled to our opinions, but not our facts. The fact of the matter is, and it's interesting, Councilman Morrison is sitting right there. We sat in my office. He asked me, he said, did we put that 18 cent back in? I said, no, it never went out because we were waiting on the school board. We said, let's go down and put it back up. I don't have a vote on the council. The council did not put the 18 cent back in there. I did ask for it, and you didn't do it. Now, Mr. Strickland talks about the aftermath. But let's just talk about how we got there. It was before I even got to the city of Memphis when they voted to cut the city school funding. Now, admittedly, Mr. Strickland says, but I wasn't for that. No, he was for cutting $50 million. And when I came in after the highest court in the state ruled, when Mr. Strickland led the charge against restoring the funds so we could stay out of this trouble, he left us no alternative. And now he claims he's not.
Your time's up, Mr. Ward. Mr. Williams, you get a crack at it. 90 seconds. Were those cuts the right things to do? What else must we do, or would you support rolling back some? 90 seconds.
Oh, yes, I'm glad we're finally starting to point out culpability. First of all, let's say the mayor suggests the budget. The council has the ability to either approve, deny, or modify a budget. The mayor has been the mayor of this city for 6 years, almost. My other esteemed colleagues have been on the city council for 8 years. So if we are in fact in a predicament, it's because of the decisions that have been made. Mike Williams didn't make those decisions. Yeah, I put up a billboard. But just like I fought for that billboard, I want to fight for the citizens of this city. Now, I say there's money in the budget, but it's a matter of prioritization. We've spent $195 million on Bass Pro. We're talking about spending $233 million on the Fairgrounds project, $18 million on a parking garage, $10 million on One Commerce Square, $24 million we have projected economic development. Now, there's nothing wrong with economic development, but there has to be a parallel. If we do not move the citizens of this city forward as we do economic development, we're living under the principle, build it and they will come. No, we got to build it for the citizens and in conjunction with moving the citizens forward in this city.
Thank you. Your time's up.
All right.
So the first follow-up I'm going to ask is of Mr. Wharton, and it's a bit of a response to a claim that Mr. Strickland made about the city's debt. And it's also a question that I have, so it's sort of combined. The city's debt load, we know, is high, and debt issued by your administration obviously is part of that. Has the city's benefit from that spending outweighed the risk of that debt? What would you do in another 4-year term to address it? And then Mr. Strickland made a claim about your refinancing contributing to the problem we're in. 60 seconds, I'm sorry.
And I say all the time about how people set a building on fire and then they get ticked off because the fire department ran across the grass to put the fire out. And then they blame it on me. He ran over my lawn. They set the building on fire and then they got ticked off because I ran across their grass. Necessitous people are not truly free people. The mess they had created before I got there by not listening, and I don't understand Mr. Strickland, he's a lawyer. When the state Supreme Court speaks, that's the end of it. Why did we pay that money back when the court ruled? We were on our knees, and yes, we did benefit. The council hired an expert to come in and test that refinancing plan. Mr. Strickland, if he were in court, his own expert witness, when Mr. Strickland started complaining, she said, but you don't have the money. He was saying, we didn't have to borrow, we could do this. But the bottom line is, in the end, and if you read the study, there is a positive in terms of net present value ratio. Yes, we did benefit.
Mr. Strickland, 60 seconds. I want your rebuttal to that. The mayor said that as he inherited had a lot to do with the council, and I saw you shaking your head when the analogy of the fire and the lawn. So I wanted to get your response to that as someone who was sitting on the council at the time. 60 seconds.
I think we ought to welcome Mr. Wharton back to reality. Because I don't know what planet he's on, but he totally missed what happened.
Get out of the way.
I did not vote for a $57 million cut to the schools. I did not propose a $50 million cut to the schools. And I voted against the budget that spent the money that was cut from the schools. What happened was a majority of the council cut funding from the schools and spent most of it on city government. I voted against all of that, and it's very clear. I also voted, notice he did not respond to the refinancing question because he's admitted guilt. He refinanced our debt which ballooned our payment $23 to $47 million a year. And he did it. Do not believe the slick maneuvers and the corny stories.
Mr. Strickland, your time's up. I have some other questions I want to get to, but this is a really important point. I think that Mr. Wharton, 30 seconds if you want to rebut what Mr. Strickland was saying.
But you know, you get in trouble in criminal law by aiding and abetting. He sat there when they said, we want to cut 50. He said, no, I think that's a little too much. Let's just take these innocent little school children. Don't take 57. Just take a little bit. Take 50. Well, that's saying to the other guys, go on, go on, go on. And you sat right there. You never did say, don't cut the school system. You never did. You said, I don't think they can sustain that much of a cut. Let's cut some of it. That's what you said.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. I want to ask a question of, I want to put a finer point on a question that I asked earlier, and it's specifically to Mr. Collins and Mr. Williams. Mr. Collins, if you want to go first. I want to ask you specifically, would you support rolling back some of the benefit cuts that were made that last year, yes or no? And if so, would you be willing to increase the property tax rate to support that?
Yes, I would be willing to roll back some of the cuts, but I think that there can be some adjustments with the cuts. See, the city of Memphis is in a contractual relationship with a lot of our bargaining units. And in those contracts are some gives and takes. I've always said that the bargaining unit lawyers are much smarter than the city's lawyers because they get the biggest piece of the pie. What I would suggest is that we renegotiate what the contingencies are. There are some savings in these contracts, but it takes honest, integrity, and a commitment to being transparent to make that happen. And that's what the bargaining units don't have. They can't trust this administration. They'll tell you one thing and you get something else. They'll tell you that it's going to be raining over here, but it's not raining over there. I'm glad Councilman Morrison is sitting there because he can tell you, look how long it took him to get redevelopment in his district. 7 years. Because he kept going back and forth and back and forth. Even in my district, Whitehaven, at the Southbrook Mall. Yes, we gonna do the Southbrook Mall. Well, no, we can't do the Southbrook Mall, Harold. Yeah, we gonna do the Southbrook Mall. Then all of a sudden, his numbers running bad in Whitehaven, and we gonna do a $50 million renovation inside Whitehaven. Something's wrong with that. And that's the problem. Nobody can trust these people. And that's why he points his finger at Jim and I.
Mr. Collins, your time is up. Thank you. The same question to Mr. Williams. 60 seconds. Would you support, I want to get a finer point, would you support rolling back some of those cuts? And are you willing to stand behind an increase to the property tax rate to accomplish that? 60 seconds.
I don't think that there needs to be a tax increase. And I am definitely for restoring the benefits to the employees because they deserve it. We have tried to balance the budget on the back of the employees over the course of the last years. I have told you, the problem is prioritization. We need to go in here and we need to cut the fat. Because what these individuals have been doing, and it amazes me how now everybody can come up with a solution to the problem when they've been dealing with the problem for so long. Yet we find ourselves in this unique situation to whereas we're having these problems. I think that if we go in, we slow down with the economic development. I didn't say stop. I said slow down. Go in and modify. You just heard that we have $1.6 billion in debt services because we've been spending money. Spending has been the problem. But we've been spending on inanimate objects and for businesses as opposed to the services that are provided to the citizens in South Memphis, North Memphis, Whitehaven. It's a matter of prioritization.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Your time is up. Mr. Strickland, I'll ask you 60 seconds as we're still on the topic of the city's financial picture. Are there any current city services that we could significantly modify or cut to make a significant impact in our budget? 60 seconds.
When budgeting is choices, like Mr. Williams says, and it's priorities. Our number one priority has to be public safety. I'm glad that the council, and me included, led the way this year to give our public safety officers a 2% raise when they'd gone 6 years without a raise, when the administration offered them 0. It's just choices. There are good things in the budget that we may have to cut, but there's also superfluous jobs. There's waste in the government. The current mayor created a second CAO position. There's 3 deputy directors of parks. There's a PR person in parks. There's 2 PR people in the library. There is fat in this budget that we can cut. But we also sometimes have to make tough decisions. And when there are good projects out there, I've often had to vote against them because we can't afford it. Because a property tax increase, which the mayor's proposed 3 of, would hurt the city if it's drastic.
Thank you. Mr. Morton, Mr. Strickland made some specific references in his statement there about fat in positions in your administration. He referenced the CAO job. 60 seconds if you want to respond to some of those claims.
But when all is said and done, that did not add $1 to the cost of government because we cut positions. But look, one thing that's been missing here, everybody's talking about what they can try to cut, but have they ever set out a growth plan? We're never going to be able to cut our way out of this, nor can we tax our way. But you just look at someone who has a record of growth and bringing in outside funds to do it, whether it's going to Nashville and get $6 million to clean up blight, to rebuild neighborhoods, or as you saw this morning in the paper, or whether it's going to Washington to get us into the high-tech jobs. Growth, 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 growth. We can't cannibalize our way out of this, but we can grow. And you're looking at somebody who has had a record of bringing jobs in here, stimulating the economy. That's what it's all about. We can sit here and split hairs and nickel and dime and cannibalize, but growth. And I've got the best growth plan and the best growth record of anybody up here.
What are we going to do with
Thank you,
growth
Mr.
and no
Morgan.
officers?
The final question on the city finances topic is going to go to Mr. Williams. Since Tennessee does not have an income tax, Memphis, like every other city in our state, is greatly dependent on property tax revenue. And our combined city-county rate's easily the highest in the state. What other avenues could you explore to create new streams of revenue that make us not as dependent on the property tax?
I agree with Mr. Warden on that point when he talked about growth, but we haven't really seen growth. We haven't seen growth of the citizens in this city. I've seen buildings go up. I've seen monuments being built. I've seen tourists come in, but we have the highest poverty rate in the state.
68%.
So that's not growth. I think we need to bring in industries, amusement parks. I think we need to generate tech jobs in the city. I think we need to generate revenue by increasing the education of our children. We need to invest in our young people. I heard individuals talk about community centers. How come we don't have community centers that are decent, that are equipped? We have to invest in the next generation. That's going to be our most precious investment that we can make. And until we start doing that, we're going to continue to have the crime. We're going to continue to have the mass exodus of citizens in the city.
Your time is up, and we are moving to the next topic.
If you close down a library, you in effect kill that community.
That's right.
A lot of the inner city areas have been killed, which creates blight. And it's been done intentionally because that's prime real estate. And individuals have been going back in, buying that real estate, redeveloping it, making cash money. Now, we can sit here all day long and pontificate, and we can play games with each other. But I'm telling you that we have to prioritize so that we can put this city back together, so we can come together. Businesses, community, we got to share. And we got to move in the same positive direction. Now, yeah, we can talk about code enforcement. Yeah, we can talk about some of the other issues, but I would also get in conjunction with Mr. DeAndre Brown and the program he has. I would expand it. I would go in there and clean up those communities and get with the citizens to give them some self-hope.
can we still attract new industry, well-paying jobs if we freeze that program? 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, we overuse pilots. Cities our size normally have anywhere from 5 to 10 pilots. We have 2 entities that are issuing pilots. We also have the Economic Development Growth Engine, and the only people that approve the pilots are the city mayor and the county mayor. Yes, we do need to freeze pilots. We need to continue the programs and the development that we already have. That way, we need to start paying down that $1.6 billion deficit, and we also need to start redirecting some of that money. I hear everybody talking about working in the communities. I hear everybody talking about trying to better the communities. And I hear people asking, where's the money going to come from? Well, guess what? We're spending the money. Once again, it's about prioritization. I'm not against economic development or the EDGE board, but I am saying they have to share.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I want to kind of break from the script a little bit and ask about pilots and tax breaks to all of you guys. 60 seconds. We've heard from Mr. Williams. Let's go to the line. Mr. Collins, is the pilot program that we have right now effective? Should it be tweaked? Should it be suspended? Just your thoughts.
I think the pilot program should come back to the council for approval, because we're the ones that's going to be held accountable for it. We should be the one to make sure that those the persons who get it or the businesses that get it are held accountable, and that's no recourse. Now, somebody would say, well, we assigned a contract with them, but we sign contracts with our employees, and we renege on them all the time. My issue is that if the city council, if we acquiesce our treasure to these businesses, it is the city's council's responsibility to hold them accountable when we do that. And we don't do that. Only the mayor and the county mayor does that. And they don't do that. And that's why these pilots and these corporations run rawhide over us. When they promise us $45,000 a year jobs and we get $10.10. And when we give them $94 million to build their facility and they hire temp service to hire our workers.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland, 60 seconds on pilots.
If I were king of the world, I would prohibit every state and every city from giving tax incentives to businesses. But I'm not running for that position. So we have to live in the real world. And the real world is that every state and every major city in the country is offering tax incentives. So unless we want to unilaterally disarm, we have to offer tax incentives or we'll be out of the job creation business. Now, pilots are the most misunderstood thing in government. Pilots are not cash payments. We do not offer cash payments to companies. In addition to that, pilots actually generate more property taxes during the term of the pilot than before the pilot, because the value of the property went up and therefore the taxes owed went up. So they're not nearly as bad as the common thought is, but we do need to hold the companies absolutely accountable. Just like I'm going to hold city employees accountable, I'm going to hold the companies who get the pilots accountable.
Thank you. 60 seconds also to you, Mr. Wharton. Mr. Wharton, 60 seconds to you about pilots.
Thank you. Let me pick up where Councilman Strickland left off. There was a swamp down there, had nothing but a city sewer line on it. It was paying $52,000 a year in taxes. During the period of the Mitsubishi pilot, it will pay $500,000 a year in taxes. Once the pilot rolls off, it'll pay, I think it's $2.5 million a year. And then counting all the folks who are working down there now, and they're not minimum wage jobs. They are high-paying jobs. So again, it is misunderstood. I wish we could be a bit more targeted and not just take whatever comes here. We need to rev up our economic development recruitment process so we can go out and pick what we want that fits in with the needs here. But we cannot just say we're out of the business. It's foolhardy to suggest that we're already suffering, we'll perish.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Again, this category is about economic development and jobs, and when you think about the economy as a whole, I want to ask you a question, Mr. Strickland, 60 seconds. You know, we've had a lot of conversation, had a lot of it last week about offenders who meet certain criteria for employment. 60 seconds.
Well, see, that's part of the pilots. If in fact we're going to issue pilots, and if in fact we're going to put clawbacks in there, or we're going to put designations in there and hold those companies accountable. But even away from that, MLG&W just issued a $37 million contract to ABC Tree Trimming. I spoke of Mr. DeAndre Brown a little bit earlier. He has a felon reentry program that's already working out in Raleigh. How come we talk about creating black wealth and black millionaires? How come we could not have given Mr. DeAndre Brown that contract, cut the city up into 4 sectors, allowed him to hire more convicted felons? What that would have done is it helps with the crime problem because they don't revert back to what they know. If you give a man his dignity, he will not repeat it.
Give him a job.
Creating black wealth.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And that is all the time we have for our topics tonight, so it's time to move on.
We live in the greatest city in the world.
That's right.
I've traveled all over the world. But there's no other place I'd rather live than in Memphis. We have asked city employees to make sacrifices, and I know there are a lot that want to put the label on me to say that all he wants to do is fight for city employees. That's not true. But I will tell you that they deserve a hard day's work, deserves a hard day's pay.
That's right.
We ask these guys to do some of the most critical things. And in doing that, they need to be paid commensurate with that. But also with that, if you don't do it, you make the citizens suffer because they call 911 and can't get through. We do have to work on economic development. We do have to work on job creation. But I am saying before any of that is going to take hold, we have to work on the citizens and the foundation of this city.
Mr. Williams, thank you. Mr. Collins, 60 seconds for your closing statement.
You know, growing up in Westwood, I watched my dad drive that cab every day for 51 years or so. Hard work. That's what we believe because we love this city. As a college student, as a freshman, I worked at the McDonald's right across the street, serving fries and Big Macs, and then coming to college. But we can do better than that now. The mayor talks about all the jobs that he's created, 140 in 6 years. That's a huge number. Our college kids don't want to come back home. Our high school students want to get out of here going 40 north because they know there's no future here. We need engineering, finance, technology, and banking jobs. That's what you do every day. You train for the next level. I want to be the mayor to help us get there. My name is Harold Collins. I love Memphis, and I want to be your next mayor to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Closing statement now from Mr. Strickland for 60 seconds.
I want
My mic to work.
Conspiracy.
We'll have to restart the timer on this.
Is it on?
Dang.
Don't touch it. Now you're good to go. I'm ready.
What was the
When
question?
I'm mayor, I want to work every day to try to make Memphis better so that my 2 young children sitting up here will want to stay in Memphis. And we're not there. If you look at Memphis objectively, we know that Memphis has moved from the 5th most dangerous city to the 3rd. We've moved from the 17th highest unemployment rate to 1st, worst in the nation for large cities. We've moved from a 26% poverty rate to a 28% poverty rate. We have to turn city government around to make this city soar. Number 1, we have to drastically reduce crime. Number 2, we have to clean up the blight and the litter and do the basics like paving roads. And number 3, when I'm mayor, for the first time ever, we will measure results at City Hall and hold people accountable. We can change Memphis. Please join me. Please vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. And microphone works. Mr. Warden, you get 60 seconds for a closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Thank you so much. And to my fellow participants, thank you so much. And to the audience, you've heard so much of I will do, I am going to do. You're looking at someone who has done, who has basically rescued the city, walked in, took the bold steps that had to be taken. As Mr. Williams pointed out, some have been here 8 years. Things are in a horrible mess. We're not out of the woods yet, but we have taken steps. We talk about building black businesses. You're looking at the guy who gave the largest contract that's ever been given to a minority business, $10 million to the Nelson Plumbing Company. You're looking at someone who is bringing, and I don't care what they say, our population is growing. To be precise, by actually between 4,000 and 5,000. The annexation is not included in that, Mr. Beasley. But all around, if you look at the attractions in this city, if you look, why is our hotel rated 73%? This city is growing. Let's keep it growing.
People don't have houses to live
Thank you,
in.
Mr. Warden. Two things very quickly. If you're a credentialed member of the media, interviews on stage, you can get on stage. And everybody here got something in their program tonight called an exit poll. There's someone out back there waiting to take them from you on your way out the door. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.